This one is an interesting one. We got Horseless Headsman calling in from Texas. Horseless Headsman, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Good evening, gentlemen. Enjoying the show. Nice to see an expanded panel. And a special hello to Jamie. I'm legally blind myself. So I always identify with that gentleman. Yes, it sucks, but we do what we need to do.
For sure. Your mind, man.
So I call to talk about the final experiment, if you know what that is.
The final experiment.
Yep, it is a trip to Antarctica that is being undertaken by several prominent people in the skeptic community, and they're taking some avowed flat earthers with them to see the 24-hour sun.
Wait, it's skeptics like us skeptics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like prominent people who have spoken out against flat Earth.
Who are taking the people to Antarctica?
Taking some flat earthers to Antarctica
on a
boat to show them the 24-hour sun.
Oh, no. That's not good. They've done this before. Don't you remember they did that documentary where they took like the young Earth creationists to like, the Smithsonian and stuff and the Grand Canyon? They didn't change any of their minds. I don't think this is going to do what they think it's going to do.
I don't know. But what are your thoughts on it, Chief?
Yeah.
That's precisely right. The flat Earth community is already backpedaling as quickly as possible, coming up with every reason why this is a fraud, why it's not going to work. They're going to give them acid. It's just,
oh no.
Yeah, they are distancing themselves from the experiment because it's dead on proof that the Earth is a globe, and we can't be having that shit.
Okay, so you're telling me all I have to do is say the Earth is flat, and I win a free cruise to Antarctica? Because that sounds. I mean, listen, I'm live on the air. I could say a lot of things right now. I don't know. Sounds like a good deal to me, but yeah, that's.
You'd have to establish.
Yeah, I of course, like when you plan a big trip like that, of course they're gonna say, "Oh, it's a psyop or something," right? Like I don't believe that's gonna be doing the work that people think it's gonna be doing, but I don't know.
There'll be a dozen different reasons why it couldn't possibly have happened. Once you've dedicated yourself to an impossibility, stacking up absurdities is no problem.
Yeah.
It's like, it's AI. They didn't even really go to the South Pole. They were in a movie studio the whole time with really strong air conditioning. There a million ways to deny reality.
Yeah.
You're
Is this going to be like a Netflix documentary, though? I'm assuming they got to film all this.
They'll film it. They'll probably put it on their respective YouTube channels. If any of the flat earthers that are going are convinced by it, they are immediately going to be disavowed as plants.
Yeah.
Like you said, sir, it is almost inevitable that this will not solve the problem because it's not about truth. It's about feeling superior. It's about being right or feeling right. And yeah.
I've got to admit, it's difficult for me to take flat earthers serious because it's just such a obviously a demonstrable false beliefs. But of course, it's like my dad used to tell me as a kid with people and their attitudes. It's don't confuse me with the facts. My mind is made up. Because really, that's what it is with these people. If they were looking for the truth, they wouldn't need to go to Antarctica to find it. So the mere fact that they're getting on a boat, maybe Dan's right with they wanted the free vacation and they're smart enough to get that. But no one's going to be convinced of this.
Yeah, nobody that hasn't already made up their minds. Go ahead.
The logic of flat Earth is so bizarre. First of all, why would anybody make a 1,000-year-long global, really hard to maintain conspiracy over something that doesn't really matter? It's like what would be the point of concealing the flat Earth truth? Like who cares?
Well,
it affects nothing. The sun still comes up in the it's like. So the point of that conspiracy.
I think the flat Earth community, from what I've gathered, kind of has a perspective on this, and this is one that's shared by all flat Earthers. But one of them is that the Bible specifically teaches that the Earth is flat, and there's some case you could make for that. And so because of that, because that is a Christian worldview or Jewish worldview, however you want to call it, that the suppression of that truth is only bringing, like, I guess, more power and influence for, like, the secular world, right? Because, like, if you can just demonstrate that the Bible has falsehoods in it, if you're, like, a biblical literalist, then, then, of course, why would you believe in the Bible, right? So I think part of it is kind of a rationalization for Christian belief. That's definitely not all flat earthers, but I have seen that postulated from flat earthers themselves who talk about, this is why. It's because they're demonic forces that are trying to
keep us from God.
Yeah, keep us from God and keep us from knowing the truth about things, right? So
well, I don't want to straw man flat Earth people. Any belief deserves to be given its due. And if you're a flat earther and want to call us and refute these things, do feel free to do so. But I know a couple of flat earthers personally, and yes, both of them are citing the firmament and the Bible and the pillars of the earth and the corners of the earth, as proof that it's flat. And I'm like, well, book says so. I guess it's true.
Yeah.
In defense, I guess that being a flat earther, as far as using that for the Bible, it's not nearly as bad as some of the other things that they could be believing, as far as promoting slavery.
Well,
yeah. The thing is, before I was a host, I called in as a caller, and it was one of the first calls I ever made, which is like, what is the minimum safe level of bullshit? And there isn't really one.
I don't think there is one.
Because the same patterns of thought, and this is what we're talking about with strong epistemology versus bad epistemology, is that if you're believing things for bad reasons, you might start acting on those beliefs for bad reasons, and that ain't great.
Yeah, listen, I've never been myself, but I have seen some footage of some flat Earth conferences. Okay, they are not just talking about flat Earth at those things,
I can imagine.
right? Like it's if you're willing to believe in flat Earth, you're willing to believe in a lot of things, and I think that there are genuine grifters who take advantage of that and sort of push their own stuff, whether it's like white supremacist beliefs, which I've definitely seen in there, anti-vax stuff, right? Other kinds of anti-science kind of worldviews. I think that all kind of gets lumped together because if it's the same demographic that's going to be listening to that, right? It's a marketing strategy on some level, which is terrifying and also sad. But I don't know. I feel like flat Earth that has kind of had its due. Like I feel like a few years ago it was really popping off and stuff. But I don't know. I feel like it kind of passed by the news cycle.
I believe the Netflix documentary Beyond the Curve or Behind the Curve was the nail in the coffin because that really made them look like they proved their own theories wrong.
It is definitely. Flat Earth is definitely 15 degrees ago.
Thanks, Bob.
What I did.
It's
yesterday's news. It's now it's just kind of an odd little subjunct of crazy in the U.S. Okay, gentlemen, thank you. I love this show. Keep doing it. Dan, you shaved your beard. Why'd you shave your beard?
I shaved my beard because people were bullying me online to shave my beard. That's honestly really why. I mean, I don't know. I was trying to do a thing with it. I still haven't cut my hair yet, which we'll see. I'm trying to see how much I can grow before my wedding, but I don't know. It's just I can't grow facial hair very well. That was almost a whole year of me really not shaving, and that's about as good as it got. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know. It's not great.
I'm a low facial hair person. I'm a low facial hair person myself. I'm working on it now. I do look like the unsuccessful makeup guy from Planet of the Apes. It's not working out, but I'm going to keep trying. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the show. You do a great job, and keep giving the crazy people problems.
Thank you so much, Horseless Headman, for that great sign off there. I guess we'll keep giving. I don't want to give people problems.
Yeah, and I don't think they're crazy. They're just some of them. Okay, that's got a lot of the baggage around.
There's a lot of baggage.
Yeah, but bad thinking and is a bit.
I've said this before, which is I'm the worst offender of this. I use the word crazy. I still say it pretty much every week. I really shouldn't, because there's a lot of things when I grew up as a Christian that people would say are crazy, and I don't think I was crazy. I think I was indoctrinated into a set of beliefs that I wouldn't have believed otherwise if it weren't for my upbringing, right? So I assume the same thing for anybody that calls in, whether it's Flat Earth or whether it's Scientology or Christianity. I think that there are a lot of conditions that can lead you to believe things that you may otherwise not have. Let's go ahead and keep going to our next caller here. We have another Canadian trying to talk to us tonight. We have Heath from Canada. Heath, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hi there. Just kind of, since you brought up the subject of hell, I kind of wanted to tell you as an atheist, kind of like, it's something that happened to me on my first day at school. And this was like before actual school. It was like summer school. I was 4 years old. And so this is like, except for a few concerts my parents took me to, my first experience was being with a bunch of other kids other than my family. And the first kid I talked to was this other 4-year-old little girl, and she came up to me, and the first thing she said to me and my brother were, God is always watching us, you know. And we were like, oh, well, God's not real. There's no such thing. And then she wandered off, and a couple of minutes later, her mom came up to us and started screaming at us. And I remember distinctly what she said. She said, you've got a black heart and you're going to hell. And to a 4-year-old kid, you know. And I remember my exact thought at the time, because I have a kind of reactionary memory. I remember my reactions to things, and then the rest comes. And my reaction was, oh, this poor kid. Like, what a terrible parent. I felt so bad for that kid. I didn't feel like I had a black heart and was going to hell. I knew I didn't have a black heart, because we only watched documentaries in my house. We watched no commercial television, just PBS.
That's right. Like
I
the
watched
good
a lot
Lord
of science
intended.
documentaries. I knew my heart was.
Of course. Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah. And I didn't believe in hell. So my reaction was, oh, this poor kid. You know, what a terrible parent, you know. And it's just kind of a thought for people who think that they get their morality from Christianity. And I remember when I was a little older, at 7 years old or 8 years old, I wanted to join Boy Scouts, because my entire social group would go on Wednesday nights to Boy Scouts. And so I saved up my allowance for, I think, 2 months in order to be able to buy the little scarf and the shirts so that I could go. And on my first day, we went and did the stuff. My dad was a boat builder, so the knot tying and stuff I already knew. I kind of got to be a hero there. But at the end of the day, he was like, okay, now we're all going to pray to God. And I was like, for reasons, I had already gone through whether or not I believed in God, and I didn't. And I was like, well, no, that's dishonest. That's lying. So I'm not going to do it. And they kicked me out at that point. It was like one day of Boy Scouts, I had to save up for 2 months to buy the stuff, and they wouldn't let me back in because I refused to. What I thought of at the time was lying. You know?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize this, but as an Eagle Scout myself, I can tell you. And first of all, by the way, it's handkerchiefs. It is not scarves. You'll get roasted by Boy Scouts, but being roasted by a Boy Scout isn't that big of a deal. But yeah, Boy Scouts of America is a Christian organization started by a very Christian man, Lord Baden-Powell, and the United States definitely took on a Christian identity. There are several religious specific awards you can get within the Boy Scouts. So when a lot of people hear that, I guess they get surprised, because I don't know, most people see it as pretty secular, but no, it's an explicitly Christian org for sure. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me that they might take offense to your lack of belief there.
I'm just really glad that at the age of 4.
Go ahead, Alana.
I'm just really glad that at the age of 4 you had the confidence and the sense of self that you were able to not take that woman's comment to heart, and that you also had the empathy to feel for her daughter. That's a testament to that your parents were doing something right with you.
I agree.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think it would just be a testament to you don't need religion to get moral as well. Like, I remember the Boy Scout leader saying to me, well, just pretend to pray. You can just pretend. And I was like, that's a lie. I'm not going to be dishonest. Because I'd gone through this thing where something had come up in the news. My mother had said something had come up about religion, and I remember saying to my mom, "Well, that wouldn't happen to our family. We're all atheists." And she said, "Well, your dad isn't." And I was like, "What?" It's like, "Well, no, he was raised as a Christian, and he still kind of believes. I mean, we don't push it on you guys, but he's a theist. We didn't use the phrase theist back then." And I thought, well, that's 5 against 1. That's not very cool. I'm going to become a theist. And I tried for 2 weeks. I tried really, really hard to believe in God, and I just couldn't do it because I don't believe in magic. And that was a benchmark for me. You have to believe in magic first, you know. And you know, you hear a story about something that's true that happens, and you hear a fairy tale, and they have a very different structure. And to me, everything I heard from the Bible was the fairy tale structure. You don't believe that stuff. It's got a very obvious, you know, made upness to it. So I guess my final question for you guys is that about a year ago, I was listening to a podcast about science and technology and about what it would take to get humans out into the galaxy. And I realized what would actually convince me that God was real. And my first reaction to that was, wow, I'm being completely unreasonable, or am I? And so I want to get your opinion. I thought if every time we looked at a new sun, there was a habitable planet around it, perfect for humans, that is so unlikely that would probably convince me that God existed. But that's already not the case. And my next thought was like, am I being an unreasonable prick? I mean, is this irrational, you know? So what do you guys think about that?
Let me try to understand your hypothetical. You're saying if it were true that every time we looked at a new star outside of our solar system and we found a habitable planet, not necessarily a lived on planet, but a habitable planet, that would increase your likelihood in the existence of God being real. Is that right?
Yeah, because even a super powerful alien race, because of the constraints of the speed of light and how much energy it would take, it's kind of unreasonable to think that could be done by anything other than basically magic. You know,
yeah. I could see that. I
think that would, yeah.
But at that point, wouldn't the aliens be a more reasonable explanation? Because at least there's some naturalism going on there, right? Like, if we exist, I still don't understand under naturalism why there couldn't be other life forms doing stuff, right?
Yeah, aliens are pretty unlikely because you would see a kind of wave of them moving through the universe. You would still see planets they hadn't yet reached and stuff like that.
Maybe.
And if the aliens were able to just go to every point in the universe at once and create a habitable planet that's perfect for us, at that point, I'm willing to say that God's at least equally likely.
Maybe,
you know,
but that is literally the plot of Neon Genesis Evangelion. So I don't know. That could be a possibility. I don't know. This is a big hypothetical. I think like the fact that we don't see that, right, is maybe more of a testament to that, you know, God not being a thing. Maybe if that was the case, I would say to be reasonable, I think it could perhaps increase the likelihood of a creator that creates the universe that is like, you know, maybe is interested in life being formed. Sure, maybe it increases the likelihood. But when it comes to the whole God part, right, because God is a very specific word with very specific connotations for a lot of people, I don't think it increases the Christian God in the slightest, for sure, or the Jewish God, or, you know, any of the Abrahamic understandings of God. I think it would have to be a kind of different God in general. The Christian God part is particularly interested in the Jewish people, for one, and then, you know, eventually Christianity, and then I guess Muslims too, eventually then. You know, so other beings on other planets, that wasn't really in the realm of at least humans' understanding of what God wanted. So it'd have to be either a very different understanding of what the Christian God is, or just a different kind of God altogether. So I don't know. I guess that's the best answer I can come up with for your hypothetical there. But I want to hear Alana's take.
Well, what I'm hearing is that the caller, I'm sorry, I forget your name, is trying to come up with a scenario that is, in his mind, inexplicable by science. And, different people with different understandings of science could come up with something like similar. I mean, you could say, oh my God, if I got a pizza that just came out of the oven with symmetrical little pieces of cheese that all looked like Jesus, that might prove that God, that proves to me that God exists. And
Well,
we would find a lot of rational reasons for that. The baker did it, whatever. But I think probably we all have some threshold where if there was something really miraculous that couldn't be explained otherwise, then you do turn to God or you turn to a religious explanation. But as Dan said, that's not the universe that we're living in. We don't have habitable planets in every
That's kind of my
system.
point. So am I being unreasonable? Because this is already not the case. We already know that this isn't a thing, So when I say this is my criteria, it's like my criteria would be if 2 + 2 equaled 3, right?
Yeah,
it's
I hear what you're saying.
Isn't real. So
I get what you're trying to say. I don't think I was getting it before, but I'm getting what you're saying now. You're saying, is it unreasonable for this to be my drawing line, right, for like whether God can be real? And I would say I think I could come up with some better ideas for reasonable beliefs. No, I would say reasonable reasons, I guess, why a God could be real. I think you can come up with some better ones. I'll give you some examples right now. If there was a God who very clearly gave his intent and did it through a press conference so that like multiple people, verified journalists, for example, could like do interviews with and collect statements from, and we could like look at different news sources and see, oh yeah, this person definitely said this thing because this source got this source got. I mean, I don't think that's that unreasonable. A lot of people will scoff at that and say, well, God can't do that. And I say, well, why not? Seems like it works for everybody else on earth. I don't know why, Jesus couldn't come out and give like a press statement or something. I think that would make things more clear. I think if a God came out and just talked to people, just made his intent clear. For some Christians, that's too unreasonable, but I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that if I'm a creator of a people and I want them to worship me and have this great relationship with me, I think you got to talk to them every once in a while, right? So I don't know. That would be my sort of line to draw. If God could just do that, that'd be great. But anything beyond that, I'm going to be skeptical a little bit. But I don't know, Alana, what do you think?
There's a long history of using miracles to prove that somebody is God. It goes back to Exodus when Moses is talking to Pharaoh and he does all these things. He, turns the rod into snakes and things like that. And Pharaoh's magicians copy part of it. And so I think we all kind of look to that, but there's so far nothing that has really been definitive.
Yeah. But if you were posed with the question, right? If somebody's asking, what would it take for you to believe in God? What would you answer to that?
I would need to see some kind of miracle that was completely inexplicable, and that was not inexplicable because we didn't understand the science of it yet. I mean, there are things that are inexplicable with quantum physics and with the way the universe works that are still being researched. So just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's God. But if it were something if somebody came back from the dead and they were really truly that person and they were standing there talking to me, that would be that would shake the way I thought.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would shake the way I would think too. Yeah. So I don't know. That's the thing, Heath, because like when you're talking to somebody who thinks you're the one being unreasonable, I would just say, hey, look at these stories that say that would happen. Why can't they happen to me? Right. I just think that that's a reasonable way to look at it. I have not had a miracle happen to me. I've heard stories of miracles, but that's about it. So maybe a miracle would change the needle, but overall, it's got to be something more than just, well, it's because the book says so, right? Which is what I think a lot of people rely on. But Heath, what do you think?
Yeah. I couldn't think of a miracle that wouldn't convince me. You make me think of The Prestige, like the book where someone actually does come back from the dead, and it turns out that it's actually his twin brother, and his other brother was killed, but they have been living as the same person for so long that they've lost all sense of their own identity. And they just both live as the same person because they've been doing it every day for decades, and they've just lost any individuality, right? And that would be a rational way of explaining someone coming back. That could fool people, right?
Yeah.
That would fool me in that scenario. So knowing that this is possible, I don't even think someone coming back from the dead would be convincing enough for me.
Okay.
It's something
Yeah.
I haven't explained yet. Like I've had times when I feel like a dream I've had is coming true, and my reaction to that is, oh, that chemical in the brain that squirts when you remember something is squirting at the wrong time now. I don't think that I can see the future or dream the future. I just know that my brain is missquirting the chemical and making me believe that. Like, there's probably very little that would make me lean towards magic rather than a rational explanation, if you know what I mean.
I think so too. I think that's a great point, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because when it comes to miracles, right, at least ones that we personally experience, that's also going to be to your own detriment, because unless you have other people in on that experience, the thing is, people have suffered from delusions. It happens every day. It happens all the time, even in younger, healthier people, right? Like, it can still happen. So somebody just saying, hey, this thing happened to me, that's still not going to be enough, at least for me, right? I think it has to be something that could at least be somewhat verified through some other process than just, well, I saw it happen, right? Like, people say, well, why does it have to be, well, why do you have to use all these methods? Why does it have to go through science or whatever? And it doesn't even have to be like an article written about it or anything. I'm just talking about like something beyond just a fishtail, right? Which is what a lot of miracles end up being to me, at least, right? Like, oh yeah, that was this big, I don't know. But I think you're right on the money there. If anybody's challenging you about this kind of stuff, I would just say, look, there's lots of ways it could happen, right? There's a whole book of stuff that I think could happen, but doesn't happen to me. And I would just point to that. But Heath, I do want to plug something real quick, since the crew brought it up. For those who've been listening to the show and maybe have been struggling with their own beliefs, particularly with hell beliefs, we do often partner with an organization called Recovering from Religion, that has some great resources on their website, and also has some folks that you can talk to on the phone about what you're going through. So just a quick plug for folks who want to have some of those resources. But for now, Heath, I am going to go ahead and let you go. Any last words you wanted to shout out before you sign off today?
I would like to plug the Philip K. Dick book, Maze of Death, which is a book where people figure out the frequency to broadcast on to actually have their prayers answered. And it's just a fascinating book about what if you could like pray into a radio and actually get them answered. And it's Philip K. Dick, so you can't go wrong. So Maze of Death, check it out.
Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
I hear that guy writes some good stories. Here he's got a few bangers, that Philip K. Dick. But anyway, Heath, appreciate your call. Thanks so much.
So we've got John, pronouns are he, him, in Canada. Would like to see what we think about the Creation Museum in Kentucky. How you doing, John?
Hello, John. Skeptic, cross-examiner. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I was wondering, what do you think of the Ark encounter in Kentucky? I want your true opinions.
I can only speak for myself. I've never been, and I wouldn't really like to say what I think of it, having not been inside the building or boat.
I'll echo that. I will say that I have not been, and I like to withhold my opinion until I have some evidence and facts. I have looked at their website. I have heard what their ticket prices are. I think it seems to be based on a story that mankind for centuries has been trying to prove is real and has not been able to, and that the vast majority of scientific evidence shows a lot of problems with the story. Now, I've never been a big fan of pointing out all the problems, the penguins walking to the Middle East and the lack of evidence in the geological column, because a person who truly believes this stuff can just magic that all away. Well, God took care of all of that. So to me, I don't like getting bogged down into those conversations because it's sort of a what if game. I think that the time to believe something is when you've been provided sufficient evidence. And as far as I can tell, and I'm open to being corrected on this, over the centuries that people have been trying to collect evidence of this story, we don't have any that supports it. And we have a bunch of evidence that shows that it would have taken a multitude of miracles to pull off. So given that, I think that there's no evidence for what they're displaying there. And that makes me sad because it means there's a lot of people wasting a lot of their family's saved money on a story that they don't even need to still be Christian. They don't need to believe in this. I know lots of Christians who are like, that's just a metaphor. That's just a lesson. That didn't literally happen. And then they can move on with their lives. So that's sort of my take on it.
What about you, John?
Oh,
have we lost John? Oh, there he is.
I will admit that it's an impressive building. Whether or not it's actually true is a different story. But I'll let you know. You see the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate 10 years ago.
Right.
I do remember that one. That was the one where they asked the question of both people, Bill Nye and Ken Ham. For people who don't know, Ken Ham, I believe, still is involved in the operation. He created the Ark encounter. And during the debate, the question was presented to both of them: what would it take to change your mind? And Bill Nye said it would take evidence of this sort of veracity, all of these different things. And Bill and Ken Ham said, nothing. I will never change my mind, which is a dead giveaway to the fact that you're not dealing with a serious interlocutor. That's not somebody who's interested in using any sort of widely recognizable system of determining truth to adjust his views. He just wants to believe what he believes.
Right. You should be a lawyer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The way you analyze things, it's very, very lawyer. And I live with one, so yeah.
I call myself a recovering attorney.
Oh, there you go. Did that help, John?
It does help. It does help. But I just like to know, what if tomorrow we Ham or someone just found some overwhelming evidence proving the Ark and the flood was true? How would that change the world?
That's a great question. I think the premise of the question, overwhelming evidence, means we would then accept it as true. So what if it was true? What if and a lot of the devil's in the details. What can we prove? That there was a boat and that it had a lot of animals on it? Or are we saying we have enough evidence to say it rained for 40 days and it flooded the entire earth and all but one family was killed and they had to have sex with each other to repopulate the whole planet? That tends to go against genetic data. But okay, let's say somehow that all is true. Well, then we would accept it. It's a bit of a tautology of a question to say, what if there was so much evidence where we had to accept it? What would you do? Well, then we would accept it and then we would seek to explain it. I don't think you're ever going to get to the point to say that because there was a boat and there was a family and there was a massive die-off, therefore God, but you will convince a larger number of people to believe in Christianity, possibly through error, saying, well, because part of this book is true, therefore I believe the whole book. But that's my take. It's kind of it's hard to answer a question because you have to sort of define exactly what, if everybody believed a thing, would everybody believe it? Yes. So does that answer your question?
What does it change? What does it change as well? So, like you say, you know, just proving that the story of the Ark was true. That what would that then change for people? What, you know, does that automatically make that God real? Would we then accept that God? You know, there's so much more to it than whether or not there was a boat with animals on it. Okay, yeah, prove that to be the absolute truth. Okay, there was a God that flooded the world. Now what? Do we have to worship that God? Do we want to worship a God that is, you know, his thing is you love me or you go to hell? I don't want to follow a being like that because that's just basic bully behavior. You know, what would it change making that one little bit true?
Yeah, that's the tough question when you say if it was true. Well, what counts as the story? Because part of the story is God did X. Well, that's where I'm saying I don't think you're going to get physical evidence that shows that, because the nature of the story is this is all magicked away. This is all miracle. This is all defying the laws of physics, et cetera. So you just have to accept that part. So if we say the physical evidence of there was a boat, there was a family, there were animals and all that stuff, yeah, I think that more people would probably call themselves Christian, but I think that it would possibly be a logical fallacy. What are your thoughts, John? If you only had the physical parts of that one story, the boat, maybe some genetics that, yeah, we did get down to one family, that, I mean, hypothetically, what we're saying is what if reality isn't, because we already have that evidence that didn't happen. But if that was true, do you think that is an open and shut case, or do you think that's an eyebrow raising? That's interesting. We should look into that.
Oh, well, you know, if we do find proof that a flood actually existed, we have to take into account. First we have to ask the question: what natural force could possibly make it rain so hard, so long that actually flood the world to the point where it covered Mount Everest? What natural phenomenon could that do? That'll lead to further scientific investigation, which would be great for scientists to find out what.
Do you not think that folks have already tried to do that, though?
Of course, they have tried to do that. I'm just saying that in this hypothetical situation, if we found something, we'll have to explain it. Plus, we'll also explain how no one's able to repopulate the Earth. But
we would also have to explain all of the contraindicated evidence, right? We would have to explain away why the ice pack column doesn't show a global flood. We would have to show why the geological column doesn't show a global flood. So it's kind of a hard question to answer. You're basically saying, what if this proved to be true? Well, then we'd have not only the mystery of it proving to be true and trying to find evidence for an explanation, a mechanism for an explanation, but then we would have to go back and say, well, all this other stuff is obviously inconsistent with this answer. Were we wrong about that? I mean, this has been peer reviewed to the nth degree. So it's a tricky question to answer. It's a little bit of navel gazing, quite frankly, or fan friction writing. Like, how do we retrofit this story into our current area? What does that get us? Because we know that right now we have no evidence, no physical evidence supporting this story. There have been, if you go look at the Wikipedia article on expeditions to find the Ark and other Ark stories, Christian scientists who investigate everyone have said, nope, not legit. We've never found any evidence. So we have zero evidence supporting the story, except stories in a book. Again, goat herders who from the Bronze Age who didn't know where the sun went when the day ended. That's what we have. And on the other side, we have all of this evidence that contradicts that story. So I don't see what purpose it gains us to do a bunch of what ifs. You know, what if God came down and said, hey, you all believe, and gave me enough evidence to believe? Well, then I'd believe. But that's not what's happening. So Why should we spend our time wondering about this what if, I guess is my question.
Yeah,
what does it
right.
gain us? How does it move the ball forward?
Oh, I guess it doesn't. But here's one question: if Christianity is all false, why do so many people believe in it, and why is Ken Ham and his friends still in business in this age?
Well, if
I think John can answer that. John,
Yeah.
I know. I've heard your calls a lot. I just want to jump in. What do you think our answer will be? Why don't you why don't you steel man my position before I even say it? Honestly, and I will try to steel man yours. I will try to give the best explanation from your side. But if you could tell me what my answer would be, I think that would be progress.
Okay, you're going to tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to tell me that people want to believe. Okay, you're either going to tell me that A, people have been indoctrinated since birth in this religion, but because their parents, their church, the country you live in, et cetera, plus people want to believe, and plus they're invested in this. And as for Ken Ham, he's obviously making money off of this, money off of this. And the people don't want it's hard for people to let go of a belief, no matter how much proof is given to them. Am I correct, gentlemen?
I think you left out some important parts. I'll give you a C on that one. I think that's progress. You understand, but I think my answer, at least, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, John, are throughout history, humanity has been wrong in massive numbers for a long time. So your question was, if this is false, then why do so many people believe it? That's a logical error. Our argument from popularity. So there was a time in human history where everybody believed the earth was flat. And there was a time where everybody believed that the sun went around the earth. All of these things were, I dare say, close to 100% of humans believed this. That doesn't make it true. And so my answer is, we believe it because that's what we were told, and we haven't had cause or motivation to go and look into it and disprove it to ourselves. So I think the other things play into it. I wouldn't bring up the fact that Ken Ham's making money from it. So I want to correct you on that. I genuinely give him credit for believing what he believes. I think he's wrong, but I think he's a genuine Christian believer, a young earth creationist. I think he is. I think he's wrong. I think that he, like many other people, compartmentalize their brain, and anything to do with religion, they don't hold to the same standards of evidence as the rest of the world. And I think that explains that. So I think my answer would be a little more complicated, but I do give you credit, John, for trying to understand me. I'd love to hear what our John has to say as well, and then we can try to steel man your position for the caller.
I just like to add on a little something extra. I take a different stance on it, although I agree with what CE was saying. You could also say, so you're basically saying, if Christianity isn't true, why do so many people believe it? Well, if Islam isn't true, why do so many people believe in it? If Hinduism isn't true, then why do so many people believe in it? The number of people believing in something doesn't demonstrate the truth of it. But if it did, would that then not mean that I could say that I believe that there's a cosmic rainbow giraffe that poops the universe into existence? And if I can convince enough people to also accept that, would that then make it true in your eyes? Because I'm getting a number of people to accept that the cosmic giraffe pooped the universe into existence.
No, that's not how logic works. But we humans, we like to. Okay, let's put it this way: we get into our fiction, and for instance, hundreds of people go to London every day to 221 Baker Street just to see the fictional. Even though it exists, they want to see the fictional Sherlock Holmes. That's how superstitious we are.
I think it's my turn to try to steel man your position, John. Yeah. So I'm an attorney, and I need to be able to see other people's sides, other people's arguments. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your argument would go as follows. Your best argument would be along the lines of this. Hey, this religion's been around for thousands of years. You know, Christianity for about 2,000 years, the Old Testament long before that. People gain value out of it, and it doesn't seem to do too many bad things, and the good that it does outweighs the bad. And this many people must be onto something. And I'm not sure, I'm familiar with your call, so I'm not sure you'll agree with this part, but you can also add on, the part that John the skeptic said of, hey, then why aren't the Hindus right if they're that many, or the Muslims they're that many right? You could even on and say, well, they're all right because they're all identifying with some higher power. And so if you take the religious versus the non-religious in the planet, it far outweighs the vote, so to speak, goes way in favor of religious belief. Is that where you would go with your argument? Do I understand you correctly?
To a certain extent, but what I'm in favor of is an honest intellectual investigation. That's what I'm looking for.
I think everybody's after that, though. I think we all want to have, like, the most, at the end of the day, the most intellectual. Some people like me will say stupid things just to, to be stupid. But we do, at the end of the day, want the truth, and we want to get to the truth the right way. So I think we're all in agreement there.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
I'm glad we agree on
now, how do we do that? What method have humans come up with that determines or measures or comes up with a model of reality that ends up being true, that can be tested and shows the right results time and time again? What method do we have that does that? Can we agree on that method?
Science.
Okay, so we agree on that there is a method. Now, if I'm going to steel man your position again, you might say, but there's an element of God that is outside the reach of science. Do I understand? Is that something that you might say?
No, I don't believe that at all.
Oh, okay, all right. Fair enough. So I agree with you. I think that it is interesting that so many people believe so many wrong things for so long in such large numbers. It reminds me, I don't know if anybody's ever watched one of my favorite shows is The Orville. Seth MacFarlane did a homage to Star Trek that's rumored to have the fourth season coming out soon. And one of the episodes in the first season is they go down to a planet where everybody has a little badge on their shirt and with an up arrow and a down arrow. And anytime somebody did something you don't like, you pressed the badge and gave them a down vote. And anytime you did something you liked, you went on an upvote. And it was a crime in that society to have 10 million or more downvotes, and you would be re-educated, you would be brainwashed. But the line from the show I'm thinking of is there's a debate going on TV about what to teach in the classroom. And somebody said, well, the economy, is functioned like this, and that's because of this. That's a fact. We voted on it last year. The point being, all of their facts in their classrooms were determined by a vote. And the whole point of that is that's ridiculous. We don't vote as to what the color of the sky is. We don't vote as to what the rate of gravitational acceleration is. So that's where I come from when I hear somebody say, hey, Christianity's been so popular, religion in a whole is so popular, it must be right. I'm like, yeah, it's a fact. We all voted on it. That's where we come from. I hope you can see how that doesn't jive with us. It doesn't convince us. Does that make sense? I mean, does my opinion make sense? You don't necessarily have to agree with it.
Right.
Yes, it does make sense. But what I really want to know is to answer the question, to ask the same question Ken Ham was asked. What, if anything, would change your mind?
For me, it would just be like evidence that convinces me, because and I think for most people it will just be what convinces that individual person. And so far, I don't accept anything that's been presented. I just don't see it working out. So for me, it will just be something that makes sense to me. I don't know about CE. He works with evidence. He's a blooming lawyer.
Yeah, if you'll indulge me, a little story that I think I go back to that addresses this question, because what this question boils down to is, from a theistic standpoint, you want to test and see, what you're trying to do is see, are we entrenched just like Ken Ham? Are we just dedicated to saying, no, there's no God no matter what? And the answer is no, generally. I believe that at some point, if there were a God, there would be a way for that God to convince me. By all definitions of gods I've heard, at least in the Christian area, the God would be that powerful. So he's choosing not to convince me. All right. So that's my basic answer. the short story I want to tell that sort of speaks to this is when I was 39 years old, just before 4 days before my 40th birthday, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Long story short, I had to have about a 16-hour operation after a lot of radiation therapy and chemotherapy and all that sort of stuff. During my recovery, I was in the ICU, and there was a nurse there that was trying to steal my property. They were giving me nasty looks. They were plotting to take my property, and they would try to grab my stuff from time to time. And I told my dear friend, she is a physician, about this. And she went and read my chart, went and consulted with my attending physician. They came in and said, yeah, your heart rate wasn't coming down. We put you on this alternate pain med. We're taking you off of that right now because you're hallucinating.
Oh.
They took me off that pain med, and with 1 hour, I realized, holy shit, like I would have sworn under oath that this person wanted to kill me. And I go back to that time and time and time again, because when I get into these discussions with Christians and they say, what if God wrote on the moon, John 3:14 or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And I would say something like, well, I need to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, or it wasn't aliens, or it wasn't whatever. I cannot describe how real this experience was to me. And it's almost to the point where I'm like, everybody should have a hallucinogenic experience, controlled environment growing up to realize how wrong your brain can be. And another story from being an attorney, eyewitness testimony, your own perception of reality is crap. We are very, very, very bad at seeing a thing, running it through our model, and understanding what is really happening. So that's my long way of saying, what evidence would convince me? It's the standard answer that you're going to hear from most people, which is, I don't know, but a God that's as powerful as most people describe would be able to convince me. But please keep in mind that when you do the what ifs and the hypotheticals, don't rule out hallucination. Just a few milligrams of a certain substance in your blood can make you see and believe all sorts of weird things.
Mm-hmm. So
that's my answer.
Okay, so saying that you don't know, but God should know, that's reminiscent of Matt Dillahunty. But anyway, I'm glad you guys spoke to me. I understand your position. Have a good night, gentlemen. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate you being direct and straightforward with us. It was a good chat.
Yeah, it was a good call. Thanks, John.
We do have John from Canada who wants to talk to us. John from Canada, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi, Dan. How are you?
Doing good, John. Doing good. I see that you want to talk to us saying the Olympics are proof of God. And I'm very curious as to what you mean by that.
Well, before I start, I just want to say that you've let yourself go, and you actually look like Wolverine from the X-Men movies.
Damn, John.
Anyway.
Hey, listen, I get it. I haven't cut my hair in a little bit, but come on, let myself go.
Just going to dehumanize?
I know.
Jesus.
It's not very nice, John. That's a red flag right there. You got to be careful when you're talking here, all right? But anyway, I'll let you make your point. Go ahead.
Okay, I apologize for that. Anyway, see, the proof of God's existence is that, as the Bible predicted, the world hates Christianity, God, and Jesus. And the proof that the Olympic Summer Games actually happened, they did that scenario with the Last Supper, trying to mock him, is proof of that.
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
I mean, so I could make a prophecy right now saying I'm going to be made fun of, and which you did, and that doesn't make my prophecies true, really, right? If I just have a good guess there. I mean, that's kind of a general claim. Tim is raising his hand. So I'm going to let Tim take it. Tim, what do you got?
John, I want to make sure I understand. Is your premise is that because I think that you said that Christianity is mocked and, attacked, at least in America, and the fact that the Olympics are making fun of the Last Supper is proof that God exists. Is that correct?
Yeah. And the people who made that thing obviously hate God, and they're mocking him, and it also backfired because so many people are no longer watching the Olympics, and it's gotten so much criticism. So it was done in bad taste, which it was.
Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible that Olympic opening ceremony actually had nothing to do with the Last Supper? Because if you watched it, I'm sure you saw the blue guy on a platter standing on a pile of fruit singing songs. It wasn't really it had nothing to do with Christian theology. It was actually an ode to the Greek god Dionysus, which is talking about, it's really an ode to the Greek heritage of the Olympics. I mean, if you just watch the performance, you'll see nothing resembles the Last Supper. Even the image that's been circulated online, if you compare that to the painting from Da Vinci, which also, by the way, is not a biblical portrayal at all. They're all white men in a room.
Right.
But besides that, if you compare it, no one's in the same posture. There's a different amount of people on both sides. They're standing behind a runway. It was clearly just a screenshot and then spread on Twitter as, oh, look, they're mocking this picture when they obviously were not. So I want to be open because data matters to me. So if you have other proof, I mean, even the Olympic person who organized this whole thing said they were not at all spoofing the Last Supper. It was completely an ode to the Greek festival and to the Greek god Dionysus. So help me understand what I'm missing here.
Wow, I hope you really don't. I hope you really don't believe all that, because it's obvious that that's a mockery of Christ. But I just want to know, what is it?
Wait.
Towards Christianity,
John. With all due respect to you, John. Hold on, hear me out. Hear me out for 1 second. Just 1 second. I am open to changing my mind if you can give me the data that would support the claim that you're making. So do you have evidence, like actual evidence, that they were mocking Jesus? Do you have evidence that the picture is representing the Last Supper? Do you have evidence that the Olympic organizers said, yes, we were taking inspiration from the Last Supper? Evidence matters here. Now, I'm not saying you can't think what you think. You can think whatever you want. But to make a claim that this is what happened when all the evidence suggests the opposite is not helping the case here.
Hold on a second. Time it on me. Look, that it's obvious if you look at the painting and the thing, they look identical. But if you haven't noticed,
they don't though, John. They don't. There's a blue guy in the middle of the stage.
They won't do this of other faiths. It's only Christianity that's being attacked. It's only Christianity that's being
not true. It's not true, John. John, it's not true. John, let me give you some more data. In America, okay, let me give you some data points, and I'll tell you what. Let me give you some just straight up verifiable data points, and you can tell me how this proves your claim. In America, 89% of all people in Congress are Christian. On our Supreme Court, 4 out of 5 of them are some form of Christian. They're Catholic or Protestant. In America, the only major religious music industry is Christian. The only major religious worship industry, church, whatever, church industry, it's all Christian. It's $1 billion industry. Christians run most of the governments. Christians have their own subcultures. There are 250,000 churches in America, way more than any other religious group. Christians are represented at the government level, at the Supreme Court. The only reason why there are so many bills fighting for anti-trans rights is because of the work of Christian billionaire-funded organizations. So I need you to help me understand, what exact persecution are you talking about in America? What? Like, give me the data on this. I'm open to hearing it if you can give me data. Give me numbers.
At the Grammys last year, they showed an ode to Satan. At the Academy Awards, they showed a bull representing the Baphomet. Anyone who comes out as Christian is canceled. James Woods, a big-time American actor, who's conservative. His agent dropped him. People don't want to touch him. People are leaving California in droves. During the pandemic, they said that it's illegal to go to church, but it's okay to go to an abortion clinic. And the fact that you guys have this show is proof of that. It's dangerous to be a Christian today.
This show? Okay. The show that I'm talking to my Christian guest on, this show right now that's happening? Are you... Are you sure about that, John?
I mean, we have a very, as the new evangelicals, as a person, I have a very strong policy of non-dehumanization. So, I'm not here to attack John or make fun of him or dehumanize him. I believe that he's made in the image of God and is worthy of that. But frankly, John, with all due respect, like, you're just so far off the mark, and you haven't given us any actual data besides really, and I mean this sincerely, right-wing talking points. I mean, even the idea of canceled, there are entire subculture industries like the Daily Wire that picks up these actors, giving them lucrative $1 million deals. Charlie Kirk is a 31-year-old Christian who started an organization that's worth over $80 million a year and talks to presidents. Like, with all due respect, I just don't think you understand that Christians in America are not persecuted. They are, in fact, the most privileged group of people to exist in this country. The rules are written in their favor. They consistently have fair representation. Most people in our government are Christian, etc. So I don't really have anything else to say besides, you're just flat out wrong on this. Sorry.
Yeah.
I am not wrong. We're being persecuted. But any celebrity who comes out is canceled.
I don't think
a conservative makes
John,
an ask for something, we're automatically shut down.
John, it's not because it's not because they're Christian that they're being canceled. It's because they're saying something bigoted towards other communities. That's the difference. You don't have to be a Christian to do that, right? If you're making comments about trans people or you're making comments about gay people, okay, people in our culture, they're kind of not liking that. There's been a turn in that. And if that so happens to align in your Christian beliefs, that says more about you than it does about Christianity, right? Because I have a Christian here, John, on my show who is basically saying the exact opposite of everything that you've told me right now, right? And he so far has shown me more evidence that his claims are true than what you're telling me right now. So I don't know. I'm kind of leaning on Tim's side here.
I mean, with all, John suffers from what I call it ACPEC, the American Persecution Complex. American Christian Persecution Complex.
Canada, so that's what makes it even more
it's also in Canada as well. There's some people there as well. But I mean, again, like, with all due respect, John, you can do whatever you want, but I don't buy it.
Or are you going to speak to each other?
John,
go ahead. I'm listening.
Go ahead, but you're on your last red flag here. I'll tell you that.
Let me tell you something. There is no conservative at all. I guarantee there's not a country in the world that's holding LGBT people back. I cannot think of a country more free than the United States.
Are you serious?
LGBT, black people, whatever. Yes, I'm
John.
serious. All we're asking for is that people respect the rules.
John.
You can't go into the wrong place. I really don't know why that's so hard.
Because here's why it's so hard for you to understand, because you're not a minority group, right? And I'm making a presumption here. I don't know your racial background or anything else like that, but like in the sense of talking about, your publicly known identity, something that if you're a trans person, is not something that you could just cover up and pretend isn't there, right? For example, you're going to be publicly judged and mocked for that. If you're a Christian, nobody's going to know about that in general until you start talking about it. That's the difference, right? There's people who publicly have been I don't want to say canceled, but really have been absolutely been taken opportunities away from them to have a better life because that they're queer, because that they go against the normative Christian sentiment. And that's been demonstrated time and time again. You're talking about these big shows that you think are mocking Christians. And yeah, I guess I can see from one perspective why you might feel that way. But which is worse, a Super Bowl show that maybe pokes some light fun at some people's religious beliefs, which again, I don't even think is true, or people who have been so marginalized from society that they have higher rates of self-harm, higher rates of general integration, right? Like,
it's just data, dude. This is just data.
I don't know.
It's just freaking data.
I don't know what else to tell you, John.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say here. No, I mean, two things. How can we forget the $1 billion ad campaign he gets us at the Super Bowl and also at the Olympics? Yeah. Okay. And they ran those ads. I also want to point out something. Someone in the chat made a good point. I want to be very clear. One of the reasons why I get so frustrated whenever, especially Western people in Canada or the U.S. make up this narrative that Christians in these countries are being persecuted, is because it actually takes away from real people of religious traditions actually being persecuted across the world. Because yes, it is true. There are Christians who are persecuted for their faith. There are Muslims. That is a real thing. Other parts of the world are not nearly as tolerant as other countries. So whenever I hear hear some of the most privileged people in the country complaining because someone who they like said something homophobic and the free market decided that they don't want them in that place anymore, which, I mean, isn't that just capitalism, baby? Right? To hear people say that's persecution actually makes light of people who are actually persecuted for their religious beliefs in other parts of the world. So, you know, with all due respect to John, I don't really have much more to say besides like, you can believe whatever you want, but the data doesn't lie. And so far in this conversation, no data has been presented to counteract what we've both presented here.
Yeah. John, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. But I think.
Thanks for calling, John. It takes a lot of guts. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's anything more to be said. I think we've made our piece on that. Let's get to our next caller. And, you know, Forrest, I want to get instead of drawing giraffes, I think you're going to be a bit more engaged in this one because I think we're going to talk about
I only
biology.
did it because there were so many donations at once, and I couldn't express my gratitude in any other way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So we do have Gabe calling in from Texas, and Gabe has an interesting proposal here. He's saying that he's asking if refusing 2 chromosomes can be used to prove that Adam and Eve didn't happen. I'm not sure about this premise here, Gabe. You're live on with us on Truth Wanted. Can you explain your premise to us a bit more?
Hello.
Hello.
I was trying to. I was I guess continuing the conversation I had with Forrest before about disproving Adam and Eve, and I was going to ask if I can use the fusing of chromosome 2 to disprove the myth of Adam and Eve.
I don't think you can, but okay. I'll hear it.
No, well, could you explain it? Could you explain chromosome 2, how the fusing of chromosome 2 works?
You're going to need to make the argument here, I think, Forrest.
Yeah, it's odd. So the chromosome 2 is a fusion of 2 other chromosomes. So when we talk about like our split from the chimpanzee lineage, right? We don't mean that we actually came from chimpanzees, but chimpanzees and us, we share a common ancestor, lived about 7 to 9 million years ago. And the one biggest difference, like that you can notice genetically between humans and either chimps or bonobos, which are both our closest relatives, is that they have an extra set of chromosomes that we don't have. And so we have 23 pairs, they have 24 pairs. And to just lose a whole pair of chromosomes like that would be lethal. Like there's not enough time for that to have phased out naturally. And so this is a big problem for evolution, but instead, indeed, when we look at chromosome number 2 in humans, we see that it's actually 2 different chromosomes fused together. And we can tell that because chromosomes have certain markers on them. At the very ends, they have these things called telomeres. In the center, they have things called centromeres. And so if 2 chromosomes were to fuse together in what's called a Robertsonian translocation, which means one just stacks on top of the other one, then you would expect to find telomeres on the ends and also in the middle, and 2 centromeres kind of halfway up both sides, one of them probably deactivated. And that is exactly what we see when we look at chromosome number 2. And so this is an explanation now. It's a way that we have kind of fixed this problem that we had. We're like, oh crap, we don't know where this thing went. There it is. Now it's solving an issue with the theory of evolution. It doesn't disprove Adam and Eve. A creationist would very easily just say, yeah, that's how God did it. God did it that way. So like, I think it's important that when we talk about these things, the fusion of chromosome number 2 is definitive evidence for evolution. It is not evidence against any magical claim. A magical claim needs evidence for itself. And that is the best evidence against creationism, is that there is no evidence for creationism. You know what I mean? And so like, that if you're calling to say like this is a good reason to not be a creationist, I agree. But to say that it disproves Adam and Eve, any creationist out there is just going to say that God works in this way, or that this was a mark left by the devil, that just like the fossils were buried by the devil, or some other damn thing to skirt around the fact that it's magic.
Okay. Also, I remember Gutsick Gibbons said that another way to disprove the myth of Adam and Eve was to point it out of Africa. Well, I didn't know how to elaborate. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there's two out of Africa events in human history, and so the word, and it's important to clarify, the word human can either mean our species, Homo sapiens, or it can mean any member of the genus Homo. So if you say humans evolved 200,000 years ago, that is correct, because that's when our species first appears in the fossil records. If you say humans evolved 2.6 million years ago, you are also correct, because that's when Homo habilis appears in the fossil record, the first member of the genus Homo. So it can be tricky and confusing, but when we talk about out of Africa, the first out of Africa event was 1.8 million years ago with a species called Homo erectus, which was the first member of our lineage to leave Africa, spread across all of Eurasia, and did a bunch of other really cool stuff too. They were the first species to build boats, the first species to build control fire, the first species to cook food, the first species to learn that you can sharpen both sides of a rock. Very neat. But then later we have out of Africa 2 with us. When Homo sapiens evolved, we then also left Africa and then colonized the entire world. So to say this disproves, Adam and Eve, it isn't compatible with the Adam and Eve story. Certainly, it is like the evidence that we have for out of Africa 2 and out of Africa 1. The whole evidence that we have for the entirety of human evolution goes against the Adam and Eve story. But if some creationists want to come along and say, well, I think the last time you and I spoke, we talked about mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. And there's these like ways that we use poetic language to describe certain singularity events in human evolution. Or they might say, yeah, well, the Garden of Eden was in Africa. And so, then we grew up there and we established a population and then we left or something else. It's really important to remember that x equals 0 isn't the same as y equals 1, and y equals 1 isn't the same as x equals something other than 1. And so these are different claims, these are different variables, these are different ideas that need their own independent evidence. And so I have plenty of evidence for evolution. Any creationist can come along and either come along with an idea of theistic evolution to say, yes, God did evolution this way. They can come across with deistic evolution to say God set up the universe in such a way that evolution happened on its own. They can come up in a way that to say that actually there was an Adam and Eve story and all of this evidence isn't really evidence. They can do what Answers in Genesis says and say, yes, Adam and Eve is literally true, and they had just extra genes, and that's why we get a variety of human phenotypes today, because Adam and Eve just had all this genetic variety that then spread to all humans, so we all only get one kind of variety. I don't know how any of that works, but whatever. And so any creationist will continue to be dishonest about these things, and so it's really important to support evolution is one thing, attack creationism is another thing. Don't try to use evolution as proof against creationism, because any creationist will just turn around and say, no, because magic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. Is there any way you can explain the nesting patterns as well? Because I don't understand what she meant by nesting patterns.
Nesting hierarchy?
She said, when I reheard the video, she said something about coming out of Africa, and it's just some nesting patterns. Maybe that's
I don't know.
Hierarchy. I'm not sure.
I think you should go ask Gutsick Gibbon that, because it's her video and not Forrest's video.
I don't know what exactly video you're talking about or what the context of what she was saying there would be. Nesting hierarchies is talking. The concept of nested hierarchies is to deal with taxonomy. It's how we classify organisms. There's this phrase, you can't evolve out of a clade, which is to say, when you're in a family of organisms, you can evolve and become a new thing, but you are still connected fundamentally to that family of organisms. And so humans are great apes. which means we are also old world monkeys because ape is a type of old world monkey, which means we are also primates, which means we are also mammals, which means we are also tetrapods, which means we are also fish. You know, like you can go back and back and back. We didn't change to a point where we are no longer connected to our ancestry. That's what nested hierarchy is all about. But that's a whole other thing that will start all sorts of semantic arguments about, you know, later on.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I hope this helps, man.
Well, I guess. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Appreciate you.
There you
See
go,
you later.
Gabe. Thanks for calling. Pretty straightforward there, I guess. You know,
Just some bioanthro questions. I'm down with it.
some FAQs done out of the way for you. Thank you.
Watch the non-profits and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.